All right, so today I'm going to show you where the best place to put speakers is in a small room. I'm just in here moving around some speakers. I had taken a couple of the last sets of speakers I built and took some pictures of them, put them on my website. I've got a little website that I put together just to kind of showcase the RestoMod speakers that I'm doing, and then put them on there in case anybody's interested in buying them. I figured, hey, might be cool, you know, kind of a one-of-a-kind speaker that is documented with a YouTube video, how it was built and all that. Only one in the world like it. Even if they're not the fanciest thing in the world, yeah, they're kind of unique. So I thought, well, I don't know, maybe somebody'd be interested in them. And then I can, you know, use that money to buy more speaker parts and more speakers to keep building. So anyway, I've got to move around some speakers anyway. So I thought, well, you know, maybe while I'm doing that, I'll address the age-old topic of room placement for speakers, right? Or where to put your speakers in the room, or if you've got a small room like what I'm in here, right? This is my office for work, and I also, you know, use it for exercise too. So yeah, believe it or not, I exercise. I've got to get back into it, man. It's nice weather outside, and oh man, yeah. I got to get out on this bike. So now that I've got this big old Jensen speaker out here, I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, that's a really cool speaker, and I'd love to kind of listen to it again. So I figured, well, I might as well set them up, swap out the RCAs that I've been working on, because those are, you know, pretty much wrapped up, I think. Put those off to the side, and I wanted to just re-listen to these because it's been a few months since I've really listened to them. But I figured this is a really good example of the average room, like a small domestic, US domestic anyway. I'm not sure how big rooms are, you know, in Europe and stuff like that. But this one here, a rough guess, I would say 12 by 13 maybe, with 8-foot ceilings. So pretty representative of a lot of smaller rooms and homes. Maybe if you're in an apartment, you have kind of a, you know, like a living space about that size. So it's a small area. So the problem is, you're a music lover and you love audio equipment and you might love speakers, right? You want the best sound possible, but you only got this little space to do it. So I figured, well, I'll just show you how I do it. How I do it probably isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It's probably not scientific. It's probably breaking all kinds of audiophile rules. But this is just the way that I do it personally, is from years of, you know, putting speakers places, setting up sound systems, building speakers, testing speakers. A lot of it is just intuitive, you know, from repetition of doing it over and over. So I'm not following any kind of hard and fast, you know, rules or formula about where to put the speakers for the best sound. You know, who knows? Maybe you'll learn a thing or two, or maybe you could drop in the comments and teach me a thing or two. Yeah. This little office of mine that I use as kind of a quasi studio while I'm making my RestoMod vintage loudspeakers. There's not a lot of room in here to work with. Probably very similar to many of you that have maybe an apartment, or you rent a room. Maybe you have a home, but the listening area that you have set up is kind of small. You know, there's a number of reasons why you might be working with a small room, and yet you still love sound quality. What I think that most people wind up doing in those situations is they throw up their hands and they say, well, I've got a small room. There's nothing I can do about it. So I'm going to sell my big old speakers and my receiver and get a sound bar. You get the sound bar, you're like, well, I'll get used to it, right? And the wife likes it because it's smaller, or maybe you like it because it just doesn't take up as much space. But after a while, you might get to the point where you're like, man, I wish I had my receiver and my speakers again, or I wish I had my surround sound set up again, or I wish I had my home theater set up again. Yeah, so there's a number of reasons why you might be working with, you know, audio equipment in a little room. All right, so basically I had shuffled around some speakers because I had to take some pictures for a new website that I put up, just where I could showcase the speakers. My thought process being, these are one-of-a-kind speakers that I'm making on YouTube, documenting it, filming it as I go, and then I've got a finished set of speakers. But in all honesty, I've got many speakers. I don't need all these speakers. All right, so getting back to room placement of speakers, basically what I want to do is take my big old Jensen's that camera's sitting on top. Yeah, I'm just about wrapped up with these RCAs for now, and I'm going to put those off to the side, get the Jensen three-way set back up just for my own listening enjoyment while I get ready for my next speaker project. I'm just going to go ahead and start working. Safety first. So this is where the Jensens used to reside when I just had them parked off to the side, is sitting on either end of these bookshelves, which that might be, something that you might need to do too. In all honesty, I mean, they're big speakers or floor standing speakers. You can still see one of them over there, maybe tucked away behind the tower speaker. But yeah, I mean, they sound really good there. So that is one place, and you're gonna, I'm sure that you're gonna load the comments. Somebody's gonna load the comments with, oh, you can't have a speaker in a corner. You can't have a speaker against the wall. You can't have a speaker next to a bookshelf. And it's nonsense. I mean, if you're a regular old person and you just have some space to work in, but you want to get the best sound out of it, you're not going to be dragging your speakers out, 6 feet away from the wall, 1/3 of the way in, 3 feet away from each side, etc. You're just going to put them where they fit and where they make sense, and where you got a little bit of feng shui as far as, can you still, like me, can I still ride my bike? Can I still get to my computer and do my work during the day? So you got to do what's practical too. So, but yeah, that being said, the Jensen speakers are enormous, and they put out a ton of sound. And they long story short, basically it's okay for big speakers to be far apart. Now, by far apart, it's not even that, probably about 6 feet apart, maybe a little bit more. As far as where I would sit, like while I'm working or standing while I'm working, because I got a sit-stand desk, I'm probably equilateral distance or thereabouts. So anyway, that's a pretty nice arrangement. Really, the only downside to it is that typically I like speakers kind of towed in a little bit. I just like the sound that they give a little bit more. I found that regardless of the speaker, it seems like a little bit of toe in can really, it gets that imaging kind of where you like to hear it. Now, as a compromise, I mean, like those big Jensens, they sound really sweet anyway. So the fact that they're flat and facing out, that really didn't bother me so much. The RCAs that I've been working with, I've had those up on like foot-high stands or something like that. That's what the Jensens are on right now. And actually, I'm going to put those on there too. I'll talk about, whether a speaker is on the floor or off the floor. But anyway, that's kind of the real deal, I mean, you got what you got to work with. And you're not going to have bass traps and acoustic panels and, diffusers and speakers out in the middle of the room and all this stuff. Not unless you're like, you have a dedicated listening space, and that's what you do, is you sit in your sweet spot and you crank it up, and man, that's awesome if you do that. Rooms are multi-purpose. This room has got to work for me, and I can't have speakers right out in the path of where I got to walk. And so I'm just putting them in kind of practical places, but still maintaining some basic principles of the best places to put speakers that have been tried and trued over and over again. So, all right, well, I'm going to get to moving here as fast as I can. Now where I sit, a lot of times, I'll show you how, so I'm sitting here like this, I'm getting up, I'm working. So that's kind of the level of what I'm looking for, is, kind of like so. So even though they work well on the floor, and you can use a speaker, any kind of good speaker, it's going to be able to project, you know, sound all over the place. So the fact that it's up a little bit or down a little bit, it's not going to kill it. I know you hear about all these, you know, you look at a frequency graph and it's like, oh my gosh, if you get your feet off center or something, then, you know, it's not like the world's going to implode or anything. I mean, you could still hear it. It still sounds decent. But to get kind of the optimal sound is you do want to get it away from as many reflective surfaces as you can, away from things that will diffract the sound. For example, putting like say a speaker right next to your TV screen, right? It's a horrible idea because that sound is coming off of there and then hitting the front of the screen and getting all wonky in front of it. So you don't want that. You want it away from objects. You want it, even the shelves, you know, the shelves have cavities and they have things sitting on the shelves, but even that isn't the greatest thing because, again, that sound comes out of those little drivers, right? It's pushing sound waves, hits against whatever is around it, and then gets projected out into the room. And that happens with every single frequency burst. So by that, I mean, like as I'm talking right now, right? It's a series of frequency bursts, boom, 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 so that you can, it's sound pressure that's reaching your ear. So picture that repeatedly coming out of the driver, you know, like this little tweeter or this little woofer. So it's just pulsating, right? Pulsating, 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 building up waves, sending them out. And so like this speaker here where it is now, they're too close together, but it's kind of nice as far as how far away they are from other stuff. So the biggest concern about diffraction would be, you know, just the baffle itself, the front of the speaker. It's called the baffle. So anyway, that's kind of my theory here, is to just get these speakers out into the open enough so that I can benefit from that extra clarity. It gives them some clarity, it gives them some more depth, especially if you're raising them up off the floor, but it's going to clean up the sound a lot. All right, so as far as distance goes, that's got really more to do with the sound stage or the presence of it, whereas, you know, the distance and how many reflective surfaces has really got, to me anyway, and I could be wrong on this, but, you know, correct me if I am, but to me anyway, it seems like, you know, pulling them out into the room and having some space around them, it gives you a sense of depth more than anything else. Maybe depth and transparency, kind of layers it a little bit better, layers the sound a little bit better. But as far as like dynamics, like bass response, like, yeah, getting them closer to the wall is definitely better for that. Getting them closer to the floor is better for that because it kind of compounds that bass. You know, the waves come out, they boom, boom, they keep pushing out, hitting against that, and then reflecting, kind of like the same way a horn works. Yeah, so, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and shuffle some stuff around. Okay, so here's what I've got going on so far, is just kind of bringing the speakers out into the room a little bit. And right now they're, roughly probably 5 feet apart or so. And I'm sorry it doesn't go in meters. For those of you who are into meters, yeah, they're 5 feet. So from, you know, Tweeter to tweeter, they're 5 feet. And from the baffle to where I would sit, you may not be able to see me right now, it's about 7 feet. So let's talk about that for just a quick minute, okay? Is the equilateral position, it's based on an equilateral. So all sides being the same distance between the speakers as each speaker is to your ear, right? Or your sweet spot. So that's the optimum stereo speaker setup. At least for many, many, many years it was. And today, as they have made speakers narrower with less diffraction off the front, that positioning, that kind of standard for equilateral positioning has changed. You'll see speakers that are tower speakers, for example, that are, not super far apart and they're facing straight out. And they can get away with that because the off axis of them, including the sweet spot, it's not getting a lot of the diffraction and that kind of forwardness that you would get from a big baffle speaker like this, where everything's being kind of projected off of this wall, this mini wall, if you will. So with those types of speakers, the tower speakers and small bookshelf speakers that you might have on stands and things like that, I have found personally that, and textbook too, is that essentially you can have something a little bit more stretched out than your equilateral. So your speakers might be, like in this case, 5 feet apart, but you're sitting 7 feet back, right? So it's a little bit kind of more narrow, kind of a triangle. And again, you can get away with that with a speaker that doesn't have a lot of that forward projection. Now, with the older vintage speakers that are large, really, I mean, towing them in is about the only option you have, and keeping them at an equilateral distance to get that really nice sound. These do pretty well close together or far apart, but my personal experience is that with mini tower or mini speakers like bookshelves, things like that, even micro speakers, satellite speakers, tower speakers, anything thin that doesn't have a lot of diffraction, those I can usually put closer together and sit further back. Now, if I really want to, and that gives you a really nice kind of a neutral sound stage, if you will. At least to me, it does. Kind of gives you the best of all worlds. It gives you some depth perception, stereo imaging, presence, sound stage. It kind of like is a really nice compromise. I call it a compromise. It's not really compromise. It's a placement for speakers, but you can get it better if you want to really fine tune it. So case in point, like with my home theater downstairs, I've got Energy RC70 towers that are like bam, they could put out a lot of sound. Now they don't have much diffraction either, but I've found for our home theater enjoyment is that they actually sound better further apart. And pragmatically speaking, where I have them, we have windows, and we've got to get to the windows to open and close them and stuff like that. So they're a little bit further out than I would like, a little bit closer to the outside walls than I would like. So what I did was I towed them in pretty drastically, where they're still shooting to, the sweet spot. And that's worked out fine. As a matter of fact, being that spread out, the panning seems to be much less focused on just the screen and kind of more immersive, kind of like in a theater, how when you're in a theater, right, you hear a lot coming from the center, but then you'll hear the things going on these sides too. So cars driving by, a ball being thrown, a gun being shot, whatever. It's like it pans better. But a lot of that has got to do with other factors too, quality of receiver, quality of center channel, etc. So I'm able to get away with it though. And it sounds really nice. And you could sit pretty much anywhere in the living room and it sounds nice. So that's pretty cool too. But I've got a really nice center channel. Let's see, yeah. So with these ones here though, these big old speakers in a small room, it's gonna fill this room up with sound so fast, right? When I'm sitting like they are right now, it'll sound good. It's a small room, it's gonna sound good. We're gonna, just for comparison's sake, I'll go ahead and use this Pixel 7 phone and the microphone on it and place that where I would sit. And then if you've got decent headphones or a decent home theater system or a decent stereo hooked up to your television or whatever you're watching YouTube on, you might hear some differences as I, move the speakers in, out, tail them in and stuff like that. If you're just watching on your smartphone, pad, tablet, whatever, without like good headphones or something, you're not going to hear the differences. But you can still kind of see where the placement of them is. All right, so let's go ahead and fire them up here from, like I said, 5 feet, facing straight out. The front of them is 3 feet away from this back wall, and it is 1.5 feet or 18 inches away from like the front of this shelf. As far as stuff around them, well, what do we got here? We've got a wall. So this wall and this window, and the window is probably a more reflective surface than drywall is, but I've got the blind down right now. But it's like less than 3 feet. Yeah, roughly 3 feet, a little bit less. And then to the corner, we're like 4 feet. So it's gonna have quite a bit of bass in this corner. That is honestly not such a horrible thing if you have your right speaker toward a corner or toward a wall. The reasoning is this is personal. This is personal. How can I put it? This is just my take on it, but a lot of your band arrangements and things like that, orchestra, things like that, a lot of the deep bass and percussion is placed on the right side. So it's usually the best place to have the most bass coming from. That includes, like, if you're using say a 2.1 system, right, where you have a subwoofer, you really wouldn't want that subwoofer. You'd rather have it to the right than the left if you had a choice to the right, and that's because you're just going to get a better experience with most music where they have that kind of standard setup. I mean, I've seen it myself at concerts and stuff too, and they seem to always have those big drums and kettles and all that stuff over on the right side. The guys with the big basses and cellos and all that stuff, and then they usually have like the flutes and things like that on that side. So makes sense. But anyway, so I'm not afraid of a little bit of bass being built up in this corner. As far as being off the floor, that tweeter it's a little under 4 feet off the floor, which is fine because, like I said, I'm going to be sitting high in an office chair and I'm going to be standing, so that's fine. From this side here, now this one's a little bit trickier because we've got kind of a bigger area here that's actually anywhere from, say, it's probably like 3 feet. Yeah, 3 feet on the low end. We go all the way back to, like, say, over 6 feet into that corner. We're going almost 6 feet over to that corner. And about 5.5 feet to that wall. So this one is a little bit tougher to deal with. Again, symmetry, like if this room was a perfect square, it may sound better, like if I had this one in the same exact spot as that one. But honestly, with this one here, what I may wind up doing with it is pushing it further out, okay? And I'll kind of explain that in a minute. But first, let's turn on some music so that you can hear what it sounds like right now in this kind of perfect, you know, not a perfect equilateral, but say more of a perfect home theater type setup with narrow speakers. It's not going to affect the sound too much, I don't think, but you may begin to see the difference as I move them out, tone them in, and things like that. All right, well, so they're set up 5 feet apart. Where I've got you at is actually right between where my ears would be if I was sitting or if I was standing. You're not in either of those, you know, exact spots, but you're kind of right in between. And the other thing is that I'm going to go ahead and turn on the receiver and fire up my Epidemic music. Try to find something on there that's worth listening to. Yeah, and then we'll listen to them. We'll listen to the same thing to try to really get your ears kind of focused on what happens when they change positions. And I think where I'm going to wind up with them, probably take them in a few different increments, outward, toed in, then finally against the walls and the corners tucked away like I mentioned, and you be the judge, or see if you can hear the difference through your headphones or your home theater. All right, let's get started. So let's see if Epidemic Sound has anything good and get you switched over to the Pixel mic. Yeah, so anyway, you're on the Pixel mic now, and I'll go ahead and just pick up from where we left off. Boom! I'll move out of the way. I'm way over here by the wall. So if you're listening over headphones, or you got your home theater, you should hear me on the left.
El otro día que me pasaste, qué bonito se sintió. Hasta el aire nos cantaba. Cuando el día amaneció, será porque tú llegabas y la plaza se alegró.
Okay, so that's in this position, right? 5 feet. Now let's move them out a little bit and tone them in a little bit. Like I said, I won't be able to get this perfect because I'm limited by this wall in this corner. But I bet you can tell if you're wearing headphones or on your home theater. Like right now, you should be able to hear me coming from your right side, you know, especially with this boom, boom, boom. You can kind of tell, right? It's going to magnify out of this corner. So I got no choice, right? It's just the corner's there. I can't move the corner. I can only move my speakers and me. So I do what I can with what I have. Same track again and see what it sounds like.
Sé que no esperabas verme y te vi muy sorprendida, pero pronto saludé. Se te salió una sonrisa y yo con eso pregunté, ¿por qué llevas tanta prisa? Qué bonito es lo bonito, qué bonito es el amor.
So you know this is real life coming behind you. So you should hear me moving around you. Now I'm pretty close behind you. I think I get the water. Okay. going to move them is even further out. I'm going to put them tucked away in these corners, and you'll hear that. All right, well, they're further apart now, so let's go ahead and give them a listen. Ready?
Soy la encargada de tarimas y tacones. No quiero llegar muy tarde y perderme de los sones. Voy al fandango ahora sí. Fortuna. Me invitaron los cantores que le cantan a la luna. Y si ahora el beso canto, solo será para una.
All right, so
se sintió, hasta el aire nos cantaba. Cuando el día amaneció, será porque tú llegabas y la plaza se alegró. Sorprendida, pero pronto saludé. Se te salió una sonrisa y yo con eso pregunté: ¿por qué llevas tanta prisa? Que se casa una amiga y por eso llevas flores. Pues yo soy la encargada de tarimas y tacones. No quiero llegar muy tarde y perderme de los sones.
all right, until next time, hope you enjoyed the video. Hey, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell and all that, okay? Thanks a lot.